I am Margot.
Can we use the microphone, please?
Oh, shoot. I have to stay here, okay. Can you hear me? Yeah. Cool. I am Margot, and I will be talking about astrology today. This is me. I'm Margot. My background was actually in science. I'm a scientist. I have a public health degree. I did my master's degree in public health, geographic information science, and epidemiology, and I work currently in geography. So I will be talking about sort of how I allowed myself to enjoy astrology and to dive into astrology, because as you can imagine, having a science background is not encouraging to sort of discovering these esoteric practices, and it is not widely supported. And just for your context, I'm a Leo Sun, Aquarius Moon, Scorpio Rising. Okay, so why do I care? Astrology gives us the secular methodology to dive into understanding ourselves, to understanding how we fit into the world, and the context around us, as well as global events happening, but that's a little bit different. But if used correctly, it can be this toolkit for further growth. I have used this for my own self-awareness. I started studying this in 2017. And it really has helped me grow as an individual and to understand how to expand my compassion and to expand my community and understand other people who are different from me in a way that gives me access to deeper love for them and therefore for myself. Why the haters? Astrology inherently sort of questions the systems that we have in place, right? So we have church, we have state, we have all of these structures in our society today. And even though astrology has been there since before these structures existed, using it kind of calls attention to the fact that, one, these things haven't always existed. And two, there is a different way still here to this day that has sort of survived those things beyond the world that we've created. And so, why the haters? There's so many potential reasons for that, but one of the big ones is that it is people trying to seek answers outside of those systems, specifically outside of religious institutions. I've met a lot of people who have had some religious trauma, who've been born into these situations and then sort of rediscovered themselves, who have sought astrology out as a way to create community, a way to understand the world that we live in, and to sort of still have things like rituals that are comforting to people who may have grown up, doing that, like the Catholic Church. They have the best magic, y'all. Like, it's just sort of extending that stuff from there, but doing it in a way that feels compassionate towards ourselves. It gives us access to this growth and to, for lack of a better word, God, without having to gain that through an institution or through someone who is a leader. It helps us seek the leader inside ourselves. Oh, am I going backwards? No. Okay, so this is a birth chart. Specifically, this is my birth chart, for example, but for those who don't understand this, it's very complicated, right? It requires a lot of nuance, understanding of each individual symbol up here, which is a planetary or point placement, the houses, which are the pie slices that it exists in, the degrees, and then the spatial relationships among them as well. And this really just shows you natural strengths and challenges. It's not determinant. It does not mean because I have this 12th house empty, it does not mean that I don't get to access the 12th house. That's the point of the whole chart, which we'll get into in a minute. And this is just a really great little graphic that I love from the Sagittarian mind. I don't know if anybody follows him, but he does a lot of like short little things that are educational. So I linked him at the end in case anybody wants to follow him. But really just thinking about our birth chart as a whole unit. Each individual planet is important, but it is important in context with the entire thing. Most people know their sun sign, right? Like, every single person, maybe even astrology haters, know their sun sign. But the sun sign is this tiny red dot right here. That's one thing in this entire piece. So when I'm looking at this sun sign, I'm a Leo, as we know. But I'm also looking at, okay, what's that thing next to it? Which house is it in? What is it directly looking across at? And what is it squaring here? So these are just examples. Okay, so we're going to get into it a little bit. So the big three, does anybody here know their big three? Okay, love to see it. So, maybe I'm preaching to the crowd, but we have our sun sign. That's your ego. That's how you shine. That's the things that make you happy. As we know, that changes every 28 days. We're currently in Scorpio sun season right now. We have our moon sign, which depends on the specific day. That changes every 2.5 days, and that represents your inner emotions, your inner child, how you need to feel nourished, how you could react in like moments of crisis, like your moon sign will often come out. And then your rising sign. So this depends on the specific hour. Unfortunately, if you don't know your hour, that means there is going to be a lot of information missing from your birth chart. But this changes every 2 hours, which is why it's important to get like down to the minute if possible. And this is really like your vibes at first meeting or your perspective on the world. And then your personal planets. This graphic is great because it's just a very quick simplification of the verbs that each of these represent. But when you're meeting someone or you're looking at their birth chart, you're gonna look at those big three. Some sort of personal flavoring that they'll have also is this Mercury, which is how you learn, how you communicate. Venus, that's not just how you love, but it is your values, it is your aesthetic. How you connect with others, and that changes every 30 days. That's similar to the sun. Mars, this is how you take action in the world, your drive, both your ambition and your sex drive, and that changes every 2 months. And then we have these other two planets down here, Jupiter and Saturn, which are considered personal planets, but because their transits are a lot longer, so Jupiter changes every year, Saturn is every 2.5 years, they tend to have like almost a cohort feel to them. So, people, there'll be a year-long cohort of people born in Jupiter, Sagittarius. Saturn, does anybody here know about the Saturn return? Okay. So Saturn is probably the most, the Saturn cohorts are probably the most publicized because, we're all familiar with that old adage of oh God, I'm turning 30, I'm getting so old. That feeling is actually the Saturn return. So when you hit 29.5, for the first time in your life, Saturn is at the place that it was when you were born. And so that really reflects you have fully experienced the Saturn cycle for the very first time. And so it's that opportunity to say, okay, how am I going to move forward with my life? Am I doing things that I've been taught, that I've been told to do, or am I going to change? What am I going to do to change that? Saturn is that daddy coming home saying, well, I want to see if you did your homework. It's saying, are you being true to yourself? Whereas Jupiter is this planet of luck and abundance. The joke is Jupiter is zaddy, and Saturn is daddy, or father. He's father time coming home. Okay, and then these are generational planets, which don't give as much personal flavor, but you would really be looking at them if they were sitting aside some of those personal planets. So, if someone had their moon next to Uranus, that's when you would sort of give Uranus a little bit more attention in that individual's birth chart. But Uranus is this planet of expansion, upheaval. When Uranus goes through your house, one of your houses, you feel that shift. It's been going through my 7th house for like 6 years, and I've been feeling that. Neptune, that's your dreams, your imagination, how you escape, what you're inspired by, and that changes every 14 years. And then Pluto, how you change, your transformations, that changes every 10 to 20 years. So, especially Pluto, we do tend to talk about this in generations. Like the millennials are the Pluto and Scorpio generations. Like there's a reason why those Pluto and Scorpio generations, like suddenly the esoteric practices are getting big again. We were really into Harry Potter growing up. We're listening to like murder podcasts, like there is just this habit with your Pluto. The generation as a whole tends to show these habits that show what they aren't afraid of. And with the Pluto and Scorpio generation, it's about diving deep into the murk, composting what is there and figuring out how to transform it. And then I just have a little gif here because anybody who spends any time with me knows I talk about this way too much. Okay, sorry, it's not way too close. Getting into the houses. So we just went through some of the planets. On top of that, there's the house systems. And this is where, it really starts to get a little bit more complicated. So each house represents different aspects of your life. And also, on top of it, each house has a zodiac sign that sort of is native to that house. And so when you're learning, what is Aries and what is the first house, you would learn those together because they do really sort of mirror each other. So as I mentioned before, having a house with no planets in it doesn't matter because like a house on its own has its own representation. In fact, having a house with no planets in it means that you don't have like a default sense of energy towards that space. So you do need to put a little bit more effort and consciousness towards building that and developing that as a whole. Okay, and I mentioned this. The best way to learn the nature of each sign is to learn its native houses. And so here we are. So for Aries lives in that first house naturally. That's about self, that's about sort of initiation, that life force. They're the match that lights the fire to a lot of situations. Taurus is known, they're sort of the creature comfort. They like the soft blankets and the things, but that is represented in the second house by assets, resources, self-worth, finances. Gemini is in this third house, that's communication, your daily rituals, siblings, extended family, but that's also just I feel like those people that you kind of have those relationships with, like the guy at the coffee stand and things like that. Cancer, here, fourth house, that's your parents, your caregivers, your foundation, your home, where you come from. This can be your family of origin. This can also be how you may transform your fourth house is maybe you didn't fit into your family of origin, and so the goal of you is to transform a family of origin and find a family of origin, a new family that fulfills you. Fifth house, Leo. Leo is concerned with pleasure, romance, creative energy, children, spontaneity, art, things, those kinds of things live in the fifth house. Virgo, sixth house, that's your work, that's your health, that's your pets. They always say, if you don't know your pet's chart, many people don't, they live here in your sixth house cusp, so that's the relationship that you have with them. Seventh house, that's Libra, that's committed partnerships, not just romantic, but close friendships, work relationships. Eighth house, Scorpio, death, mental health, other people's resources, but I would say the way to think about this, because obviously death is really intense, but it's more about how does Scorpio take the shit and turn it into compost. That's what Scorpio's good at, diving deep. They're the swamp dwellers. They know how to make things grow in those kinds of circumstances. So that's what the 8th house is about. Sagittarius, travel, education, publishing, religion, sort of all those things that are asking the larger questions outside of daily life. Capricorn, that's your career, that's your legacy, so not just like your work. Your work is here, right, Virgo? Capricorn, 10th house, is what are you leaving behind at the end of your life? Aquarius is very concerned with community, friends, social media lives here, so those kinds of things. Like your audience, I would say. And then Pisces. So the 12th house is known as like, it's like the hidden realm. It's a secret to be kept from ourselves. Mental health, past lives, past relationships. So, say like my 12th house is Libra. If I'm like dating a lot of Libras for whatever reason, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm dealing with this 12th house issue, this 12th house energy right now. And this is another little graphic, so just keep in mind that like, your birth chart by itself, it doesn't say too much, like, right? It shows you what's possible, and it shows you also what you need to work on. But unless someone is like putting the work in and growing and taking it constructively and applying the lessons, that doesn't mean, it doesn't indicate anything. So an example I didn't say earlier, but like, a lot of people will say, oh, I'm not going to date him because he's a Gemini, or I'm not going to date a Virgo, or whatever. And so, in those cases, if you're running into a lot of Virgos, or you have that feeling about a certain sign, I would, ask you to look at your chart and say, where is Virgo in my chart? Why am I struggling with Virgo energy right now? And sort of take that lesson and apply it to yourself. And then just some like fun little things with astrology in the world. Like, I feel like it's less hidden now, but it is like very widely used by a lot of people. And I'm just sort of listing individuals here, but like, there's lots of religions and religious leaders who use astrology. Ronald Reagan very famously hired an astrologer in the White House when he was the president. Beyonce, Renaissance, like if you know Beyonce's chart, she released that album at her midheaven. Like it was on point at her midheaven, July 29th, 2022, which is my birthday, by the way. And it's like, okay, Beyonce, like she was like planning for this to be like one of her greatest albums ever. And then how do you start? So I've listed some things here for some free birth charts. And honestly, I would start just get to know your own chart. Pay attention to the moon changes, especially new and full moons, and see. So like right now, we're about to go into a lunar eclipse in Taurus. We're in Scorpio season. So what I would say in that case is like go in, look at Taurus, and say, how is this moon? How does this feel? Because the best way to learn astrology is to experience it, is to implicitly learn it through journaling, through meditation, through paying attention to what is going on in the current sky and learning how that shows up in your life. Because the question, I'm not here to tell you, you act a certain way because you're an Aries. I'm here to ask you, how as an Aries, Sun, Gemini moon, are you experiencing this right now? Because we are our birth charts are not us, right? And then these are just some little moon ritual pictures that I included. So this one was like a Mars ritual. Here you can tell just by some of the symbology and the coloring. This one was a Venus ritual. And then these are sort of ancestor altars that I made for Samhain, which is next week, or Halloween. So moon rituals, again, an effort to connect to nature, to the cycles of nature, because that is another thing about astrology, is it's like, you're going through a rough time right now. Astrology helps us look at that and say, okay, this is a phase, this is a cycle, this cycle will end. What am I learning from this right now? And on the same end of that, if you're going through a really positive experience, you're feeling a lot of abundance, you can say, okay, I'm gonna really soak up this abundance because I know I will experience dark times again, and I can learn from this abundance as well, versus always waiting for it to be good when it gets bad. Okay, and then talking about Saturday, we have the lunar eclipse in Taurus. Each coven is different. The one I'm a part of, we do not manifest during eclipse season. It's an opportunity to take a break, do a lot of meditation, do some journaling, reflect, go dark. And the vibe for this specific one is it's really closing a chapter, because the first of these series started in November 2021. This is the last eclipse in the Scorpio-Taurus axis until 2040, I think. So think back to November 2021 and look at your chart, look at Taurus and Scorpio and say, what have I learned? What major things have shifted in my life? And then also, because Scorpio represents this dirt, the sort of hidden compost, Taurus is like the spring flower. What is hiding beneath the surface that I need to uncover in order for this bloom to happen? Because Scorpio deals a lot with sort of the dark stuff, it can be things that we aren't, open about. And then, this is an opportunity also, be mindful. This is kind of an intense eclipse. We have a lot of other energy going on that's a little bit more complicated, but, don't be reactive, be reflective. That's the point of these eclipses. When things feel intense, just take a step back, journal about it, and then have that important conversation. And then here are some resources that I have learned throughout the years that I love. Jason Fleming, that's those smaller digestible little things on Instagram. Eliza Kelly, she leads the coven I'm in. Kenny Nicholas, she's probably the most well-known astrologer at the moment, but she also has a really great app. So if you do want to dive into your specific birth chart, I would 100% recommend her app. Valerie Mesa, she does more collages and artistic representations, but I do feel that helps you gain sort of an implicit understanding of things. Colin Davis, I love him. He looks at astrology and academic research and does a really great job at bringing them together through this mental health or relational lens. And then Shekinah Davis, she's an intuitive astrologer who I've worked with a lot, who I really, really love. So I'd recommend her for readings if anybody's interested. Oh, that's it.
All right, everybody, one more time for Margot. Sweet. Good. It sounds like a whole bunch of people in here. Questions? Hands and questions. Can we go from the back to the front?
Yeah.
Great.
Margot, I'm a little confused with the planets that move more slowly. There were I had sort of when they change, when they transit, and I don't get the difference.
What is the difference for you guys? Know what this is like for me, man. We gotta figure out a good question. The difference between when they change in transit is awesome. That's it. That's the question.
Okay, so the question is when it changes signs, right? So we have 12 signs in the zodiac, so changing signs from Aries to Taurus to Gemini, versus transiting is talking about the full cycle. So when a full transit happens when you go through the full zodiac chart. So in this example, Jupiter changes signs every 1 year and then transits the full zodiac in 12 years.
Hopefully that was clear. Yes, lime green hat. Question.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Okay. I have two questions. So if you're
One
comparing-
question at a time, please.
okay, what do you think about paywalls with Zodiac and astrology apps? Are they putting in a lot of work, or is it stuff that's already been read? Like, how legit is that?
How legit are these Zodiac apps, especially when they're behind paywalls?
I mean, it depends on the app, right? So Time Passages is the app I use for all my charting. And I think that's like a one-time you buy it and you can put as many charts as you want. So 100% I recommend that app. The Chani app does have a paywall as well, which is a little bit high. I think it's like $12 a month. But if you are new to astrology especially, there's so much content in there. She also does like monthly rituals. So, those are the two that I do actually pay for. Some of the others, you would have to give me an example.
And there was supposed to be a slide that had her information if you wanted to ask more questions and go in detail, but Mario kind of took that slide off of her updated one. Yes, you.
You kind of like glazed over the fact that like I'm a scientist, but now I want to hear more about that journey.
Can you tell us more about your journey as a scientist?
I mean, I'm still technically a scientist. This is what I do when I'm not being a scientist. But I do think there is obviously a relationship. I'm a geographer. I think of things spatially. I work with maps a lot, so I do feel like it's a sort of natural transition to look at things spatially. And there's going back to the app question again. Sorry, I'm gonna pull this up. Oh wait, here it is. A lot of apps will have like it in tabular form, and that really is, for people to access this information without needing to know the symbols and things like that. But the thing I love about this is the same thing I love about mapping, is like you're looking at the spatial representation of something. You're looking at not just the fact that my moon is in the 4th house, but it's in opposition to my sun. And it's squaring my rising, like that's really important information. Sorry, that got off topic from your question. But the journey of my life towards like just trying to find some kind of faith, I would say, is I was always really curious about people who had really strong faith, because I did not. And I was a big reader growing up, so I have read so many religious texts, just trying to sort of grasp at how do people have this, and seeking it for myself. And I would say, going the science route sort of pushed away delving into esoteric stuff, but and don't distract me, Mom. And so once I delved into this, and I was just like, I'm just gonna do this, I don't care. I'm curious, like I'm just gonna do it, I don't care. And I just found that as I got into it more, this is what helped me build my faith in our connection as like humans. Like it's almost like this soul, the ecology of the soul, And that's what I love about it too, is like, we all have this chart, we all have every sign in our chart. And so when someone's annoying you, you're like, I'm annoying myself. When I'm annoyed with Virgos, I'm annoyed with my 6th house. And so what am I working through in my 6th house? And it really is this concept of like, we're all the same soul, just rearranged in a slightly different way. So to me, that is beautiful.
Yes, in the back, your question.
So, I just recently got out of a relationship, and it started in November 2021. So your whole slide about the lunar eclipse was very interesting to me. And I've been doing a journaling piece. Is there anything active that I can do to help myself through this transition?
What can she do to help herself through the transition of getting out of the relationship? Good.
I would say you're doing it. You know, like especially during Scorpio season, which is about composting those situations and those experiences and sort of, and you know, think about it, compost is, it's things breaking down, it's smelly, it's gross, you don't want to be around it, so let that process to happen. Knowing that if you do let it happen, in the end you will have these beautiful lessons that you can apply to future relationships. You know, because of the eclipse, I wouldn't like suggest manifesting or like doing any sort of cord cutting ritual or anything like that. I think you're journaling, meditating, sitting in the muck, as painful as that sounds, that's the best thing that you can do right now.
Yes, with the cat ears.
So I have a Taurus, and this kind of giving me some grief right now. Where I go back to my chart, because I have my chart, what would I be looking for?
First of all, I feel you. Tauruses, sorry. All y'all in the room, whoever the Taurus, my bad, but look, I got my own grief for my Taurus too. Look, my Taurus, my mama. I get it. What do you do about these Greaves, these Tauruses? How do we fix them? What was your question? I was so concerned with mine. I forgot yours.
It was more about like, what can I look at to kind of see like the bigger picture?
Yeah, how do we deal with these Tauruses? Because what's the bigger picture? How do we solve these problems?
Okay, so that doesn't surprise me. It's the lunar eclipse in Taurus, right? And then that's not shade on Tauruses, but it is the lunar eclipse in Taurus. You know, any fixed sign, so that's going to be Leo, Scorpio, Aquarius, Taurus. Those signs are amplified right now. If they're amplified in a negative way, I would say that's definitely like poking you, saying, okay, you know, this is up to you how you're going to handle this information, because you're getting the information, you're getting the feedback, but I would definitely look at your chart and just say, what planets do I have here? What house is this actually in? And like, what aspect of my life am I dealing with? Yeah. Without seeing more information, that's the most general I can say.
If you can fix it, let me know.
Fix it. Fix it. Any more questions? Yay, nay? No? Yes? Back there?
Okay. As someone with a busy mind, do you have any tips for meditation?
Tips for meditation through astrology for people with busy minds.
I can't
Go.
sit still and like, it rattles off. I have no drive towards meditation.
For that, I would actually look at like your moon sign and your Mars, and remember that not everybody meditates in the same way. I have a Mars in Aries. I have to be active to meditate, so I have to move every day before I start my day. So I do that by yoga. And meditation does not mean sitting and going empty. Like, not everybody's capable of that. So it is about sort of accessing, how can I get to that space where I'm not thinking, right? I'm just doing. And I have found, just for me, repetitive movement every day, even when it's boring, even when I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this, this is boring, why am I doing this over and over again? There's a beauty in that, and your body's meditating.
Thank you.
Wait. No more questions, right? Oh, yes.
I have another one. Can you speak anything on, like they talk about the seasons, like spring, summer, autumn, all that, with the signs, like how Capricorn's in deep winter, so it's partially about like gathering like the resources that you have and dispersing them in the best possible way for like all the people. Is there anything on like speak to about that?
What was the question?
Wait, did you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. Whatever the question was, just answer.
So the question is sort of related to, and I'm blanking on the names, but like each season has 3 signs grouped together, right? So there's like the initial one that's like spring and spring, then there's the middle one, which is fixed. So like Leo's like the deep summer, so that's fixed fire. And then the final one. And I think, are you talking about like the fixed nature of?
No, I'm just talking about the overlap between the signs and like the seasons of the world. Like, again, how like Capricorn is about like
Yeah.
a lot of resources around.
Yeah, so
Whereas like Leo is like kind of reveling in the splendor of abundance.
yeah. And then there's the final sign, which, you know, I guess I could use like Virgo, and they're the transitionary signs. There's the ones that lead you in, that's the preparatory signs, and then the middle ones, which are like sitting in their season, and then the final ones. And sort of each of these, depending on where they're sitting, it does like lend. So there's like mutable signs, which is the the third one. And mutable signs tend to be really good at just like shifting, like changing things up. Fixed signs, I'm heavy fixed sign, very stubborn, very like in their place. So that's the Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius. Those are all fixed signs. And then, oh man, I'm blanking on it. Do you remember?
Cardinal?
Cardinal. And cardinal signs, like those are the initiators. So Aries is a cardinal sign, Libra is a cardinal sign. And so that's bringing you into the season. And they're good at taking initiative in a general kind of sense. On what? Depends on which sign you're talking about.
Hopefully that answers your question, but everybody put your hands together for Margot.